Be seated, please. Indeed, God bless the King. For so many decades, we sang, God bless the Queen. So it's a new era for everyone in the United Kingdom. Now, before we begin, please allow me to state some housekeeping guidelines. First, for physical attendees, questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please raise your hands and the microphone will be brought to you. For those joining us virtually, if the volume is too low, kindly check your system volume and adjust appropriately. This event is being recorded and will be available live on our YouTube channel, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, Nbcc. For comments and discussions, please use the chat icon for those joining virtually. Questions will be submitted through the Q&A chat room and they'll be answered during the session. For posts on social media, kindly use the hashtag Nbcc Economic Outlook 23. Thank you for listening. May I have the honor to invite the President and Chairman of Council, Ms. Bisi Adeyemi, to give our welcome address. May we clap for our President, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Good morning, patron, council members here present, members of ESCO, the British Deputy High Commissioner, our distinguished guest speaker, members of the Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce, and ladies and gentlemen. I'll start by wishing you all a prosperous 2023 in perfect health. In alignment with our cardinal goals as a chamber, our commitment to continue to elevate the value proposition to our members and all of our stakeholders, we host this Economic Outlook event annually to undertake a comprehensive assessment of the opportunities, challenges, and indeed the threats that businesses should expect to contend with during the year at national and global levels. I'm sure many of you would like to have a sneak peek into what the year holds. I certainly would like to have some sort of crystal ball to determine what will happen post-elections, particularly with respect to the key economic indicators. To share insights from his crystal ball with us, it is my pleasure to welcome the Oracle, as he is fondly called, and our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. A round of applause for him. Mr. Rwani, as you all know, is the Chief Executive Officer, Financial Derivatives Company. He's an astute finance and banking professional with over 3 decades of an outstanding career at leading commercial banks in Nigeria. He has a rich and extensive experience as an economist, banker, and a financial analyst. Our moderator for today's event will be Mr. Wole Famurewa, anchor at CNBC. Mr. Famurewa is an experienced TV anchor and business content producer. A round of applause for our moderator. I would like to thank especially our sponsors for today's event, First City Monumental Bank, FCMB Bank Limited, Sterling Bank PLC, for their generosity, and in particular the Programs Committee, Professional Services Group, and the Advocacy Committee for putting this event together. A round of applause for them, please. I'm particularly delighted to welcome amongst us today Mr. Ben Lewin-Jones, British Deputy High Commissioner, and I'll invite him to please make a short goodwill message before we yield the podium to Mr. Rwani. Ben.
Well, thank you. Good morning indeed. I'm Ben Llewellyn-Jones, the British Deputy High Commissioner here in Lagos, Nigeria. Happy New Year, for those I've not seen. I think you just about still say that, so I will. I'm very conscious that you've come not to hear me, but Bismarck, and it would be wrong to cut into his time. So I'll simply say how much we're looking forward to 2023, how important it is that we use our voice as much as anything to help shape the policies of those who might lead Nigeria, and how we at the British Deputy High Commissioner and High Commissioner are doing that as well, and how interested we are in ensuring that there's a successful, prosperous and growing Nigerian economy, which is a challenge right now, but post-election perhaps we will see some changes that may support that. So I'm very interested to hear what Bismarck has to say. I've got some tough questions from myself. I'm very grateful to the Nbcc as ever and for our partnership with them for presenting this opportunity, and look forward to today's session. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ben, for the goodwill message. Without much ado, I go to introduce Mr. Bismarck Rwani. I have a script here, but I'm going to bin the script because we all know who BJ is. So may I invite Mr. BJ Rwani to come and make his presentation. May we give him a welcome?
Chairman. Let me stand on existing protocols, as we say in Nigeria. Today, we are going to be discussing the macroeconomic outlook for 2023. But let me start off by, okay. Are the slides moving? Okay. So, okay. Now, fortunately, I'm not at Chatham House, but Nigeria-British relationship is quite extensive and historical. In so many words, every presidential candidate or leading presidential candidate has been to London, one, to Chatham House, to meet with the British government, also to meet with the Archbishop of Canterbury for prayers. And what's interesting, they've not all gone to the city of London, where the capital, which is the financial capital of the world. But it's interesting that this morning I was listening to Ghana, and they talked about Ghana trying to reschedule its debt. And two things came out on that discussion. That was, one, that Ghana is no longer what they call a developing low-income country, and therefore it does not qualify for certain levels of debt restructuring. Two, that Ghana has started its debt restructuring negotiations now, and it's going to take a minimum of 2 years to do the restructuring. So the lessons from this are that Nigeria, because our GDP per capita is over $2,000, we do not qualify as a low-income country that qualifies for debt forbearance and instant debt access to the debt markets, multilateral debt facilities, as we did in 2003. Two, that even if we start the discussions and appoint our advisors today after the new president comes, it may take at the earliest 1 year to be able to achieve debt restructuring. So it's not at the drop of a hat. And this is a very difficult environment. I think I'll just put that on the table. Now, secondly, somebody help me push the slides. Okay. Thank you. So because I have only about 40 minutes to make this presentation, so you're going to pardon me, I'm going to be going very quickly. So two things. One, I've said every Nigerian leader has gone to Chatham House. Every Nigerian leader has gone to see the Archbishop of Canterbury. Every Nigerian leader has gone to raise diaspora money for their campaigns. Okay? Two, that why are they going there? I talked about the multilateral funding arrangement. Typically, almost every country, developing country or developed country, has three types of debt. One, domestic debt. Two, multilateral debt, which is concessionary. Then, actually there are four. Three is the what you call the donor Paris Club debt. And then finally you have the London Club debt, which is private holders of debt, and the London Club of Bankers. So typically when you have a debt crisis or debt restructuring like Argentina, anybody, they say the route to London is through Washington, next stop Paris, and then finally you end up in London. What do they mean by that? The Bretton Woods institutions, which is the IMF, the World Bank, and others, would go through your program, you would discuss that, and they don't give you that much money, but they give you some long-term money at concessionary rates. Then you go to Paris, where you now talk with the Club of Donors, the Exim Bank of the United States, COFES in France, and I think Export Credit Guarantee Department in the UK, and so on. Then you have those bilateral debts, which are then renegotiated. After that, you go to the London Club of Bankers, where the holders of the hedge funds, the money market funds, and the banks will then. So it's a very long, arduous process. And then the terms of the creditors range from market-friendly policies, sustainable goals, and all that. And finally, and it's not guaranteed that the fact that it is necessary for you to have the market-oriented programs, open policies, and all of that, but it doesn't guarantee you success. It's not sufficient. You still have to do other things. And so yesterday when the Egyptians were discussing their problem, and it turned out that they've done everything, and yet their currency is shredded already, and inflation is at monumental levels. The same thing has happened in Ghana. Inflation is now 54%, right? And they've been to the IMF, I think, 17 times in the last 20 years or so. So what I want to say here is that there are no easy solutions, but let us go quickly to what the presentation says, and I'll be pretty rapid about this. Firstly is the relationship, the interconnectedness between Nigeria and the global economy. If you look at the slides, and they'll bring them up very shortly, you would see that over time, Nigeria's growth at the peak was about, in 2003 or 2002, got to about 15%. Inflation rate was about 8%, at that time 9%. The oil price was $30 or $35 a barrel, then, but strong dollars at that time. And our population was much lower than what it is today. We are 214, then we are at about maybe 150 million people. Now, so anybody changing the slides, please? No, you have to. Faster, I've gone past that. What? Okay. Now, this is what I'm trying to point out here. You see, if you look at what we've seen actually is that, let me take it this way, that over time, when we had high growth and low inflation, actually Nigeria was more or less disconnected from the global economy. It was a military regime, and then we got to early democracy days. But as we went along, right, and we got more interconnected, we had the benefits of global trade and global flows. However, we became more vulnerable to exogenous shocks. Nigeria's relationship, global economic picture in the past was purely trade. In other words, you exported oil, cocoa, gas, and tradable goods, and you imported tradable goods. So the balance of trade was the most important element. But between 2003 and after the debt rescheduling, and now, we've seen that the invisible accounts, which is because you have the tradables, which are physical goods, and then the visible, which is flows of funds, investment flows, diaspora flows, illicit flows, and all other flows, dividend flows, and both foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. And the invisible flows and the service sector of this economy was becoming more important than actually the physical goods part of the economy. But the thing about it is that investment flows and the service industry is more policy sensitive than your physical goods. You can go and get your oil, get your cocoa and all of that and sell it. But the confidence of the investment community is critical and paramount to your success. And that has happened over the years. If you look at the various, you see the slides will show you that as we're going along. But another thing you must note is that the population, the demography of Nigeria, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the urbanization wasn't as much as this. The people were still living elsewhere. Their skills were for physical agriculture, construction, mining, and so on. Well, fast forward 10, 15 years, the skills, people have now become digital, they become technology-driven, they become more entertainment and culture and movie-oriented. And that has changed the flow. So to succeed from an economic policy perspective, you needed to nurture your physical and your real sector, but you also need to nurture and build the confidence of the invisible sectors, which is the services. So we moved from just being a good producing, commodity producing country to also offering services, including entertainment, Nollywood, diaspora flows, and all of that. And that's important. And if you look at it, the data shows that when the balance of trade was going into deficit, the funding mechanism, which was not properly captured, was more than covered by diaspora flows, investment flows, as well as music, Nollywood, Burna Boy, Wizkid, and all of these flows coming now. But your regulations and your policies, as you go, were tailored mainly for exchange control. You bring your Form M, you do this, you pay this duty, and all of that. But nothing was, the focus was not on the confidence of the invisible side of this economy. And that invisible side of the economy has almost become almost 50 to 60% of the flows that keep this economy going. When you lose the confidence of that community, which include, and it's not bankers, and it's everybody. When your musicians will not bring their money back in because you say that they should come and sell it at 460 or 400 and take 65%, they are rational economic agents. They will not do anything. And that is the crux. That's a structural defect in the policy orientation. And if you listen to all the candidates, all of them are talking about we open up, we do this, we do that, but they've not addressed that fundamental shift which happened without people noticing it. The jackpot syndrome and all of these things are all part of that process. People, let's go and get investment flows. Let's work there and earn and bring it back. So, and then you see government officials, governors, ministers, everybody talk about opening roads and building bridges. That is the physical economy, not the service economy. All right. So I wanted to let you know that. So if you look at our trade patterns, and it's very important, Nigeria's largest trading partners, India, China, and then, of course, different parts of the European Union. Britain, in terms of trade flows, has lost its importance. But if you go to the service area, you look at the number of flights that are coming to Nigeria, right? British Airways, 14 flights a week, Virgin Atlantic, 7. And you take the capacity, you find that almost 20 to 25% of traffic coming out of here, that's service. If you, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you put on your television or you go into any beer parlor anywhere, what are they watching? English Premier League. That's service and that's flow. Right? Medical tourism, education tourism, legitimate and illicit flows. So, what I'm trying to point out here, thank you. What I'm trying to point out here is that do not access the relationship between countries or based on trade alone. Look at that invisible sector. And that has become almost 50, almost 60%. Now that the oil is being stolen, so that amount of trade, and you can see it, the trade surpluses are dropped because the bulk of the oil is being nicked, right? And therefore, but at the same time, the more the regulations, the more rationing, the stricter and the more draconian those rules are, the more the invisible flows disappear. They would come in, but they will come in through the efficient market because they are rational economic agents. You can send the entire police force, the entire Nigerian army to go into all the banks to look at who is remitting what. It's a total waste of time. Complete waste of time. You have to assume that there's an efficient market hypothesis which has been studied and agreed upon in every book of economics. And that's why I'm pointing it out. And I want to emphasize that. So, that's the context. One, Nigeria is getting more integrated with the global economy. Two, that the more integrated we are, the more vulnerable we are to shocks. Three, there's a consistent and trend moving towards services. Four, that the service earnings, the invisible flows, more than compensate for the shortfall in the balance of trade. And that this is happening subconsciously. We are seeing it, we are noticing it, but it is not the focus of policy. It's not the focus of the mentality of the people in the policy environment. So we pay lip service. Oh yes, we're going to be. It's going to be. Government should create an enabling environment. If you create an enabling environment and there are 36 checkpoints between SEME and Festac, and there are 74 checkpoints between when you're taking goods, even domestically in the country, then you're not ready. Right? So, you have seen, as we go along, you would notice that something else is happening. It's working? Okay. One other thing that we must know is that our trade flows, we've gone from China. China is the largest source of imports into the country. India is our largest export market. Spain, Belgium, for all sorts of reasons. But Britain itself has evolved from being the empire, right? The dominions, colonies, and overseas, as they used to call them in the past. Joined the European Union, Brexit. So there's a change in their role in the global economic picture. But again, the traditional links between Britain and Nigeria remain. And I think the support or the collaboration between Britain and Nigeria is moving in that direction. It is important. Trade is important. Goods are important. Medical tourism is important. Education tourism is important. Entertainment is important. Premier League and all those things are important. But you look at it in totality, and you find that there is a lot of interdependence between Nigeria and the rest of the world, and also a lot of interdependence between Nigeria and Britain because of its old links, language, education system, and so on. So, what's happening? What do we expect to happen in the world in 2023? First of all, 2023 is going to be what we can call almost a normalization. Don't forget, from the days of Trump all the way, we had Brexit, we had the Trump victory, we had America for America, and the Monroe Doctrine, then the reintegration of America with the rest of the world. We've had COVID, and then we've had Russia-Ukraine war. And so it's a normalization of the old order, to a large extent modernized. We're also seeing a lot of digital transformation. And the emphasis over the last 3 to 4 years has been the shift to renewable energy, clean, sustainable goals, and all of that. But the Davos conference, as it just started, the emphasis has also, one other thing has been emphasized, which is income inequality. So there's going to be emphasis on clean energy, sustainable goals, but now income inequality. An Oxfam report showed that 1% of the world owned more than 66% of the wealth. And when I tried to explain this at the NESG presentation for one of the candidates, and I said, look, the way to understand it is that there are 100 pieces of meat in a room, and there are 100 people in a room. One person has 66 pieces of meat, and the rest of the people, the rest of the 99, have to share the balance. Now, not only that, the next 5 have 20 pieces of meat. So you add 20 to the 66, 86. So the last, right? 14% of the 14 pieces of meat left for the rest of the 90 people. So you can imagine the scramble that will take place if one extra piece of meat comes into the room. That's the way I want you to see it. But it went further to say that in India, 1% of the wealth, 1% of the people own 41% of the wealth. And they went further to say in Nigeria, 3 individuals had more wealth than 88 million people. So that's a dog whistle to say that, fix your economy, grow it, but also distribute it more equitably and sustainably. So the goals are changing, and I'm just saying, those are the rules, they are the way I see it. Another thing we must know is that after an extended period of expansion of quantitative easing and easy money, the world has moved into a high inflation environment. And you'll see the slides as we go along. It tells you that we have a 40-year high rate of inflation. In fact, Britain luckily came down marginally to about maybe 10.1 yesterday, Europe 10. The US, it has come down more aggressively to about 6% from 9.5%. We've seen massive increases in interest rates. And the consequence of that is that we would have a recession in 2023, but not a very deep recession. It will be a shallow recession, so there'll be a recovery. But in all the revised forecasts, Nigeria is supposed to grow at about 3%. We are not as optimistic. We think Nigeria will probably achieve about 2.5 in 2023. Because 2023 for Nigeria is the election in the next 2 months. There are elections February 25th, another one March 11, and a runoff probably. Then litigation, and then celebration after the other, and then the rude awakening of where the bodies are buried, and after that, the real work. And after what I heard in Egypt and Ghana and all of this, I was thinking that, okay, once we appoint Standard Chartered as our advisors, within 2-3 months we can wrap up this thing and go to business. No. It's not as easy as that, because you're going to have to deal with the multilaterals. You have to go to Paris, you have to go to London, and then they have to agree on all. And by the time they finish these negotiations, you're already revving up for the next election. So no easy answers. So we are looking at a mild recession. We are looking at high interest rates and debt burden. I think Nigeria is issuing a bond, 1.2 trillion naira bond in this quarter, the highest level. So basically, that's the context. We will have to interact with the rest of the world, And the sectors that will grow, the sectors that are very important, are the sectors that will benefit from, one, a liberalized market where debt instruments will reflect the level of inflation, one. Two, an exchange rate mechanism that will lead to convergence, right? And we are beginning to see that already. We've gone from 420 to 461, and the parallel market has gone all the way from 815, 820 to around 745, 747 yesterday. So you can see that concentric movement happening. The securitization of Nigerian debt, which is a big issue, 40-year paper, 9% per annum, 3-year moratorium. Nobody's going to buy that, so the reality will set in. But what it does mean is that it sanitizes and brings all of these variables that are disjointedly priced together, right? And they have very serious implications, including wages, inflation, and all of that will come together. I'm optimistic about what the future holds, not because the candidates are saints. It is in fact because the candidates will have no choice but to do the right thing. And so the options are limited and the choices are hard. Now, so what sectors will benefit? So again, let's see. Economic slowdown, reform, fiscal deficit, elections, debt, exchange rate premium, and inflation to moderate. That's what we see. Thank you. Next slide, please. So GDP, Q1, you can see it here. That's this quarter, 3.03. Q2, 3.27. And this is 2022, actually, 2.75. And then last quarter, the quarter that just passed, is down to 2.31. So that's the trajectory of debt there. So the sector that will drive growth, very importantly, is ICT, for the 5G investment, manufacturing, trade. Trade is very important, wholesale and retail trade, agriculture, real estate and construction, and financial services. All of these sectors will benefit from stability of policy, opening up of the world, and a lot of work to be done. I think we have to know that. But the big risk is that every investment and progress in the ICT sector creates displacement effect because people lose jobs. And it must coincide with a massive investment in real estate, construction, civil works, and all of that. I heard this morning that 1.9 trillion naira is being given to Nbcc to fund 44 roads. Yeah. So now, again, remember the Indian experiment. They grew very rapidly, but the income inequality increased sharply, as against the Chinese model, which took 700 or 800 million people out of poverty. And you see, the income inequality we're talking about is always measured in economic terms by what we call the Gini coefficient. The higher the Gini coefficient, the more violence and crime-prone a country is. One of the countries with the highest income inequalities in the world is Mexico, right? And Mexico, those of you who have watched a movie called Traffic, everybody needs a bodyguard. You need a driver, a house help to follow your child to school, and you need a bodyguard just in case somebody's going to kidnap them, right? Mexico, South Africa, where there's money for people who can go to space there. At the same time, a lot of people in the shanty towns are suffering. Where is it lowest? The lowest Gini coefficient is in Norway, Denmark, Scandinavian countries. So it's not for nothing that even the Bill and Melinda Gates, after making so much money, now going to foundations, Warren Buffett, to ensure that at least, like they say, where I come from, they said the poor cannot sleep because they are hungry, and the rich cannot sleep because the poor are awake. So it's very important to know that. So these are the sectors that will drive growth. And this is just the inflation trajectory. We think it's going to start declining. Why? Because of equilibrium pricing and the exchange rate. Today, we think that it will kind of, if you just take away some premiums here and there, it could converge around 580 or so. In other words, both the parallel and all of that. We think that inflation will moderate to something like almost 15, 16% from its current 22, 20. That is, again, we differentiate between what we are told and what we know and what we don't know. So, again, inflation to interest rates will also begin to, we think that the, the MPR, right, will begin to moderate from its current 16.5. They may not do anything on next week, Monday or Tuesday. I don't think there's an appetite for, and nobody makes major changes 30 days to an election and policy, because it can only be misinterpreted as being politically motivated. So my sense intuitively is that it remains where it is. External reserves depend on what you mean by external reserves. External reserves, here we talk about gross external reserves. Normally you talk about net external reserves. Gross external reserves include encumbered funds. If you back out the encumbered funds, then you would have another thing. I think that's important, right? So we think that if you back out the swaps and all of that, we had about $39 billion or $38 billion. We think it comes roughly, you get about $17 or $18 billion. And that's not more than, at best, you had 50 or 45% of what is being published. And that's what's important. The fiscal policy, I heard this morning on the radio as I was coming here that the subsidy removals program starts on April 1. Whether that's an April Fool, I don't know, but I do remember that it was on April 1st, 2020, March 31st for that matter, that the lockdown started. And people said, no, this must be April Fool. Lo and behold, it was not April Fool. Right? That was when they announced closure of all the markets, everything. First of all, Lagos, Ogun, and Federal Capital. Remember? And closed down the clearinghouse and everything. The rest, as they say, is history. So I heard again this morning that on April 1st, there's going to be a major adjustment in price of petroleum products. Well, getting here today was a nightmare because of the petrol situation. And all of this happening 30 days to an election is not a good sign. I've been in the trenches long enough to know when certain things happen, it makes it very difficult for the people that are running the shop to sustain their political fortunes. So, very briefly, aviation. I think here we have both domestic and international aviation. So, two things that are important. If you have a currency value that is now more market-driven, and there's availability of the currency and less restrictions, the invisible flows that will come into the system, they are coming into the system now, but coming through all sorts of crooked ways and means, and that makes it more inefficient. If all those flows were coming in, right, there was a time there was Western Union, you just walk in and it was not a hassle. You could use your Naira card anywhere in the world, as long as the rate reflects the market reality. So these sectors that are sensitive to such things, so you will see air passenger traffic. In fact, 2 days ago, the International Aviation projected that international travel, air travel, will surpass the 2019 levels this year. And they're projecting the price of aviation fuel, jet fuel 1, is going to go up to that level. Important here is that even domestic aviation, which is a function of security, is going to rise. Why? because 12 major highways have been concessioned out. The concessionaires are going to use concrete barriers, drone technology to ensure that you will be able to travel from here to Ibadan, from here to Benin, Kaduna, and all that without being harassed. You'll notice that all the guys that were kidnapped at the Goodwill station in Benin have been caught. And it was drone technology. Within minutes, they found out, and they've arrested traditional rulers who were behind the whole kidnapping. No. And when I was in Benin last week, and I had breakfast with the MD of the Nigerian Railway Corporation. I said, what the hell are these people doing in the Goodwill station? He said, no, you don't understand it. There are a lot of people who are going to Uromi, and instead of flying to Benin and driving from Benin to Uromi, found it faster and more efficient to fly to Warri, catch the train from Warri, and come out there. And those were the people that were targeted for kidnapping. So I'm just saying this because of the what happens in domestic and international travel. So you're going to have all sorts of people. You have Royal Air Maroc, British Airways, Lufthansa, everybody coming in the market. The hub status, 78% of the traffic out of this country continues to rotate around Lagos. Emirates and all the other guys will come back in, right? And so you will have, that's the sector that you have to look at. Chemical and pharmaceuticals, this is where Britain has a major advantage. There's a lot of promise in this area. And so for traders, for those who are doing all of these guys, in fact, the European Union as well, Bayer and all the other guys are going to, there's Emso, Merck, Pfizer, and all the other. Telcos, again, sector grew by 2.35% in 2022. It declined, but again, we are seeing there's telco infrastructure and there's telco services, right? And then you see the telco infrastructure, the main infrastructure, the submarine cables and all of that, but then the other things, and Wi-Fi, broadband, and all of these resources. So we've seen that, and so you find here, you have 9 Mobile, MTN, Airtel, and all the other guys, Main One, Equinox, and all the other guys that are doing that. Major opportunities. But not only that, because every time you increase this and broadband penetration, it also drives productivity in telemedicine, teleeducation, and drone technology. So there's massive productivity gains, especially in a country where there are where there's huge population and concentration centers. Financial services benefits mainly from this, but that sector is being cannibalized by fragmented because of the threats of PSBs, the technology, and all of that. What does it do? It makes them more efficient and competitive. So what's going to happen in this sector? That pricing is going to go down, fees are going to go down, charges are going to go down, but it's going to be high volume, thin margin. But again, it becomes a much more efficient part of this economy. Now, construction. Construction had a boom in the last couple of years. And when I say construction, I also go into the building materials. And building materials include cement, aggregates, iron rods, and all that. So there's the Ajaokuta steel project, but also they are going to have all these roads that are being concessioned are going to be finished, graded, and you're going to have this high 5-foot barrier, so that for you to kidnap somebody, you have to jump over a 5-foot wall, come into the road, kidnap the people, throw them over into the bush, and all of that. So it just makes it just more too complex, right? So you're going to have bridges, roads, and all that, anti-flood, irrigation. So massive. So this, all things being equal, after the elections, the country becomes like a big workshop where everything is going to be. Okay. So debt rationalization, productivity increases, at the same time activity level. So, and all the projections show that performance of the economy, general performance of the economy is going to be much better as we go into 2023, 24, and 25. Agric, again, this is a sector that has the value chain includes seedlings, fertilizer, land preparation, tractors, and all of that. So you can get this sector up sharply and take advantage of all those goods where Nigeria has a comparative advantage, tubers, so on and all that. So we're going to see a lot of that. And also, Agric also benefits from improved technology in terms of settlement of transactions. So the velocity of circulation of money also going to be much more. So post-election Nigeria, like this voter distribution, 93 million. But again, this number of voters assumes that from 1999, nobody on the register has died. So if you reflect natural attrition, especially including COVID and all of that, and beavers, the numbers, and I will be pleasantly surprised if you have more than 25 million votes in this next election, even though people are saying they're going to be 40, 50. No, I don't think that's going to happen. So I heard Professor Yakubu talking at Chatham House yesterday. It was quite interesting. I think, again, technology makes it more difficult. And his comment, which was quite interesting, was that why this argument? Say, when you hear about voter buying, it means that the technology is working. It is. You have to buy the votes because instead of grabbing the ballot boxes and running into the bush. You can either buy the voter's interest or work so that the voter would see. So it means that the voter's power is increasing. That's why somebody wants to buy them. You won't buy anything which has no interest. So, but again, everybody is saying the same thing. If you look at all the manifestos, I think they were written by the same person. This slide here shows you. This shows you free and fair elections. This guy here, that guy is going to the ballot box and he's being asked to. He's being motivated to vote right. So that's what you're going to see. Then I had Olisa Agbakoba saying yesterday about whether the law says that you must have majority in 25%, 24 states, right, and the Federal Capital Territory. So if you have, he said, even if you win 100% everywhere and you don't win in Abuja, then you've lost. So he's asking that they should ask for a declaratory judgment and all of that. And the other thing about officers changing their minds after 7 days, right? It depends on who motivates you to change your mind. And if all of them change their mind, so to avoid those, I think those things will be resolved. So, again, there are 4 of them, Atiku, Tinubu, Obi, Kwakwanso. Everybody's been to Chatham House, everybody's been around. Muslims and Christians have all seen the Archbishop of Canterbury for prayers. But again, you've seen when you've seen them all. Even if 4 of them became one, right, they will not be able to solve the problem with a magic wand. So we just have to assume that 1, leadership, 2, policies, 3, institutions. I think that's the thing. And it is the strong institutions that guarantees positive outcomes. And those institutions have all been dismantled or fractured or what have you. So I think that this is just Q1, election, Nbcc meeting, no change, we don't think so. Q2, elections on the 25th, elections on the... But one thing you must bear in mind is that Buhari had won elections 3 times in the north with the 12 million votes. But 2 weeks later, in the governorship elections, he was only able to produce only 2 governors. So the bandwagon effect, once you've lost the presidential election, you are more likely to lose, right? 2, that these ballot papers do not have the picture or name of anybody. And therefore, I heard somebody say, one G5 governor saying yesterday, vote for this and this and that. It's complex enough just knowing the difference between the old 200 naira note and the new 200 naira note. Then you're adding another complexity to say when you get there, when a senator, you vote for this, when is this? They give you the 3 ballot papers. It's not going to work. If you are voting for the broom, you vote for the broom all through. If you are voting for Mama, Papa, and Pekin, if you are voting for umbrella, you go. So it's complex. So just keep. It was Bill Clinton said, keep it simple, stupid. It's the economist. So that's my understanding. So the outcomes are not going to be that easy because this is the first time that we've had, since 1999, that we've had a tripod election. It's always been one from the north, one from the south, right? And in the bus stop, they say, that's what they say when you're doing the card. Yeah, so now it is 3. This is the first time since 1965, in fact, 1979, that we're having a tripod race. It's always difficult. And the answer is that if A and B, let us say if the PDP wins, what is in it, number 1 and 2, what's in it for the southeast, south-south? If Tinubu wins, what is in it, right, for the south-south and southeast? And vice versa. Okay, all right. Yeah. So, well, let me just wrap this up very quickly because I have to. So, the outcome, difficult to predict, and there'll be a global recession after election. Whoever wins in the middle of a global recession fears, but we will integrate properly with the rest of the global economy. And as it is, there'll be slowdown in most of the regions, and you are going to have, notwithstanding, Nigeria is not going to experience a recession. And actually, there's going to be a boom, but a slow boom accompanied with a lot of hard work and a lot of opportunities. There'll be layoff of workers, as you can see, and also, so in conclusion, very simple, 4 points. Nigeria's economic outlook looks gloomy in the short run, but it gets better as you go along. The growth will slow down in 2020, but will not go into recession. Take a toll on business and investors in 2023, but know that the general election will hold and the runoff is almost, we think there may be a runoff, but no matter what happens, it will be contested and the courts will determine who gets there. After the election, the hard work starts, the opportunities begin to emerge, and then things become much more easier to discern. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, we applaud Mr. BJ Rewani once more. That was vintage BJ, as usual. I'm going to call our moderator for today, Mr. Wole Famurewa. I have a script for Wole too, but I'm going to still bin the script, just that I did for BJ. Wole is the West Africa anchor person for CNBC. He's well known. If you want to speak about 5 top anchors regarding the economy, Wole is one of them. Wole, may you just come up and take your seat. Wole? Will you welcome Wole, please? So before BJ returns from a short interlude, Wole will just engage the audience just for like 5-10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tajuddin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to also listen to the oracle as he described him. So Bismarck Rewani has spoken, and I think there's a lot to unpack from what he has said. So he will be joining us in a moment to take the tough questions, as I think Tajuddin also put it. But before that, I thought perhaps we should just highlight a couple of his key messages, and then that should prepare us, including those who are online that are joining us, for that engagement. So I want to just reiterate that those who are joining us online would also participate in the Q&A. So please just type in your questions and we'll be running through them, and hopefully we'll get to them as he joins us very shortly. So I think, and I'm sure many of us will agree, that the big takeaway from his presentation is that confidence has waned in the Nigerian economy. He spoke very clearly about how the economy and how it works has changed over the last few decades. He emphasized the importance of confidence as it impacts invisible flows and so forth. So I think that that's perhaps a big issue to get a good sense of how do we instill more confidence in the Nigerian economy, and what's the outlook for that? What can the candidates or whoever wins the election bring in terms of confidence? But I think one of the other big takeaways that he shared is that there are no easy solutions. And we'll probably get him to clarify what he means by that. What really is the state of the Nigerian economy right now? What are the challenges that whoever takes over will be facing? A lot has been said about the debt situation. He spoke about Egypt and Ghana, and I'm sure many of us are really concerned. Would Nigeria move into a Ghana-type crisis? I was reading the other day that inflation is well over 50%. And we are already complaining with where it is now. Can you imagine if it were to deteriorate to that point? So it will be interesting to hear his thoughts on where exactly we are at, how fragile things are, and hopefully he will be sharing his thoughts on that. He mentioned some of the trends that I think will be very important to business people. He talked about greater urbanization. Over the last 2 decades at least, I think it's quite clear urbanization is a big thing now. It's what is attracting certain type of investments into the country, so we have to pay close attention to that. But he also mentioned about Great Britain, that it's still a very important partner for Nigeria in terms of flows related to services. And again, the issue about confidence comes in again. Those flows are driven by confidence. So what is the outlook for confidence? One area that he didn't speak a lot about, and I'm sure we'll like to hear his thoughts on, is on the issue of oil production. Now, thankfully, there have been reports of improvements in that area. But what is the outlook? How fragile is that situation, and what are the implications? So hopefully I hope to engage him on that. And he mentioned 2023 in general as a year of normalization. But he also highlighted a couple of points which I think are very important to pay attention to. These are global trends, and while they are global trends, we can certainly situate them in Nigeria as well. The first one he mentioned is income inequality. It's a big issue. We have seen how that has manifested in terms of protests. Many of us remember the NSAS-related riots. We remember the attacks related to reports of xenophobia in another country impacting Nigeria. So you do just get the feeling that there's just something that is needed to spark people, to trigger some kind of protest. So it is something to pay close attention to. So what does that mean for businesses? How should businesses begin to position themselves for that? He mentioned high inflation as a trend globally, and we've seen how central banks and monetary authorities have responded to that. He has mentioned that interest rates have moved up dramatically over the last 12 months. What does all that mean for global growth? He mentioned that, yes, he thinks that there will be a mild recession, but in the context of that mild recession, what does that mean for Nigeria? Because he has already made a very strong point about situating Nigeria in a different way compared to, say, 2 decades ago, where it was really all about trade. We're selling oil, and perhaps other commodities. But now, confidence becomes a big issue that's influencing how, for example, the currency performs. On the elections, which obviously is a big topic, I like the way he put it. He said, he highlighted runoff, litigation, celebration before the real work starts. It'll be interesting if that plays out as he has predicted. But I think the biggest takeaway from that comment is that it does appear as though the real work will only start after the elections. So what's going to happen over the next couple of months? I think we perhaps need to get his thoughts about, for example, the fragility of the currency. I'm sure many of us are very interested in whether or not we're going to see the so-called 1,000 naira per dollar mark being hit at some point very soon. He talked about the securitization of Nigeria's debt. It's a very important but also somewhat controversial move by the authorities. We'll see what all that means for financial assets and interest rates specifically. Now, he has mentioned something which I thought was interesting. He says candidates have no choice but to do the right thing. And when he said it, to me it sounds like that's obvious, right? They have no choice but to do the right thing. But what does history tell us about Nigeria doing the right thing? Is there something different about the current scenario that is giving him the confidence that they really indeed have no choice but to do the right thing? So we'll certainly get his thoughts on that. Now, I think it was Tajuddin that drew my attention to the fact that in his presentation, he seemed to have highlighted something about the appointment of a CBN governor in 2023. I wonder if that was a typo, because as far as I know, it should be 2024. So maybe he will need to clarify that for us as well. Maybe he's close to these people, so maybe there's something he knows that that he needs to share with us. But at the end of the day, it really made me, as he began to dwell on the issue of the elections and this point about candidates have no choice but to do the right thing, I began to think about the electorate and just this whole concept of elections. The elections are really a popularity contest based on marketing. So you market the candidates and the electorate buys or refuses to buy. And I just wonder what the future holds with the people that are really at front and center of these campaigns. And maybe we'll just hear his thoughts a little more about what the manifestos of these candidates offers. He mentioned something along the lines that it does appear as though one person may have written the manifesto for all the candidates. So, like I mentioned, it's a popularity contest and it's marketing, right? Inflation likely to peak in the first quarter of 2023. I'm sure that will be good news to many in this room, given what inflation has done over the last 2 years. And so we may need to interrogate that a little more. How confident are we that indeed inflation may have peaked? Because, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen what has happened in Ghana. Many will suggest that Nigeria and Ghana are not the same, right? So we'll see. And then I've talked about distortions of invisible flows. I think that is an issue that's still in the context of this discussion around. Yes, sure. So still in the context of this whole issue about confidence, the distortion in invisible flows may have significant implications for the Nigerian economies. And then at the end, he highlighted what he described as the opportunities. So I imagine that many of us paid close attention to that. And as he began to run through the list, it occurred to me that, we're in an era where there is so much, if you like, financial product engineering with technology, there's crowdfunding and so forth. So if we know where they're making money this year, then maybe some of our financial experts can begin to create products that can give us opportunities to invest in them. So he highlighted aviation, chemical and pharma, telecoms, financial services, construction, agriculture, and voters. I don't know about that one. But very, very insightful comments in terms of where the outlook, very insightful comments in terms of the outlook for Nigeria's economy. We'll be engaging him in a moment, but before we do, I just want us to turn our attentions to the screen as we watch some short videos from our sponsors. We are really delighted for the partnership and support of our sponsors. And so just for a moment, please cast your attention to the screen as we watch this video.
Time waits for no man, or so they said. That's why you set goals and set your minds to achieving them. Because somehow you believe that one day your time will come. So through the highs and the lows, the good days and the not so great ones, you never stop thriving, hustling and showing up. Because you know, even if tomorrow is not guaranteed, at least you've got control over today. But it's not enough to believe it. You've got to live it too, with the right partner by your side, providing you with all the support you need to forge ahead and reminding you that now it's your time, not tomorrow, today. Today is yours to create greatness, to achieve your dreams, to reach your goals. And with FCMB, today is yours in every way. FCMB, my bank and I. Time waits for no man.
My name is Anthony Uwei, and I sell chicken and eggs for a living. Sterling Bank has supported us through the Sway AgFin program. It's a very deliberate attempt of a traditional bank in Nigeria to support agriculture. A single-digit interest rate from a commercial bank in Nigeria is actually very applaudable. The financing actually was very good for us in expanding our capacity. Since when we got the financing, we were able to double our capacity to produce more for the markets. We've worked with more smallholder farmers. Wealth is actually created in the value chain. We've employed more staff, and of course, we've provided more chicken and eggs for the markets. Now, farmers know that the Sterling Bank Sway AgFin program actually works and is real. So for farmers, take advantage of this opportunity. Your dream can get better with Sterling Bank Sway AgFin.
Can we please appreciate Sterling Bank and FCMB with a round of applause for their partnership? Many thanks to them and, of course, to all our other partners that have made today happen. So on that note, I think we are ready to engage the Oracle again. So I'd like to now welcome him to the stage, Mr. Bismarck Owani. Please put your hands together for him. Yeah, right there. So I have the pleasure of leading this interaction, but it's designed as an interaction with the audience, the virtual audience also included. So, Mr. Owani, thank you so much again for the presentation. I tried to recap some of your key messages while you were out, but now we're going to try and drill down into some of those messages, because I thought they were, to some extent, very high level, but very valuable indeed. So the first point I want to get to is your thoughts about the impact of weak confidence. So you clearly stated that confidence from the investment community, from the diaspora, has now become a significant issue for Nigeria's economy. So my question for you now is, what, in your view, are the short to medium term? What's the short to medium term impact of that weakened confidence? Because what we're hoping is that post-election, whoever is at the helm will begin to take deliberate steps to improve confidence.
Okay, thank you, Wale. I think the question is, what measures must you take to reverse this confidence deficit, right? And what are the implications? We know the implications of confidence deficit. That's why your currency went to 850. That's why there's jackpot, there are all sorts of things. When I say jackpot,
so all those things will just accelerate if we don't address it.
If you don't do it. That's what you're saying. If you don't do it. So let us say, for example, you see, in economics we have what they call signaling, and then the reaction. The most important thing is the signal. If you send a signal that, okay, these shenanigans are over, and we'll do the following and all of that, immediately people will take their cue from there.
Can you give me an example of something that potentially could be that?
Okay, let me give you an example. If I was, if
you were,
if I was the president, if I had
exactly, if you were on the ballot, for example.
No, if I had the misfortune of winning the election, I would do. First thing I would do from my own perspective is that I would go the way the United Kingdom, the United States, and Germany has gone. I will separate monetary policy from bank examination. I'll just break it down. All this bank examination, all this, and all the shenanigans will go somewhere. The monetary policy, which is purely economic, policy management in exchange rate management, not allocation, just determining how the rate is determined, determining how the interest rate and the yield curve, collaborating with the. Once you send that signal, like what Britain did, Bank of England is different from Financial Conduct and Financial Prudent Authority. Totally different.
So just that press conference
press conference that this is what we are going to do. We are going to move. We are going to change this. All of a sudden, people now know that this. You see, you must convey an element of seriousness. Number one. Number two, a single window for customs and all of that, so that people are going to steal anyway. So why don't you just make the whole system efficient so that what is not stolen becomes more than what is stolen? I think that's right.
Okay. But of course.
And so on and so on. So the markets will react to all of these things, including the stock market, and the integration of your stock market with your economy. So listing of Nbcc and all that, just concessioning the airport. It's not a big deal. You can concession airports in 6 months, right? I think it's basically, if you have the courage to take on 3 vested interest groups who in any case would have brought you to power. That's why I'm not on the ballot, because the oil cabal who are still in oil. So 2, the illegal mining and bandits and all of that, second. And then 3, the regulatory and policy extortion cabal. You cannot get to power without all these 3. But the thing is that where I come from, the first thing a king does is to kill the kingmaker. So if these guys were the...
We need to know where you come from, sir. You keep saying where we come from. No problem. We'll leave that for now.
Okay, that's the saying that, right? So the point that you have to take on this, if you can be ruthless enough to do that and say clearly, if I was the one that I would do only 1 term, so you cannot blackmail me into a re-election, right? 1 term, kill the kingmakers, announce my reform.
So it's very important that whoever wins really signals that courage
Absolutely.
to take
Once you do that,
tough decisions, and then eventually people will begin to take you seriously.
Your oil theft will reduce, your revenues will increase. That your debt service to whatever the debt service to GDP or revenue ratio will immediately change. 2, because the extortion racket in all of these taxes and all these things, because you have restructured those things, it will reduce significantly.
Right. Okay, let's talk a bit about, the so-called claim that Nigeria is not an oil economy, and where you situate oil in our future post-election.
Okay. Now, it is wrong. Nigeria is an oil economy anyway. It's an oil and gas economy. Let me put it that way. 2.
Well, I think the reason people say that is because when they look at the breakdown of the GDP, that it's not driven.
GDP is output and activities, right? At the end of the day, it's revenue. So 90% of your export revenues come from oil and gas, period. So you cannot forget that. But it's what you use the proceeds of that to do, to keep the economy going, which is the most important thing. And then over and above that, then you have the invisible flows. So you have your oil flows, your gas flows, you have the invisible flows, and then investing in what you call the chemicals, petrochemical, that entire value chain. If you did all of that very quickly, especially now that oil is, we are beginning to see the obsolescence of oil over time coming. So you can send the signals very clearly, but you got to understand that our bargaining position as a host country has gotten much more weaker. And when you realize that, 1, because your bargaining position is weak, also as a debtor country, your bargaining position even gets much more weaker. So accept your reality, right, first. Just come to terms with your reality and then deal with it. That way, like they say most times, the fiscal adjustment is easier than the mental adjustment. So please don't forget that. I can increase the duty, I can do this, I can ban this and ban that. That doesn't do much. It is me accepting that I'm a former rich man. That's the most important thing. That is a very difficult.
So that's the sober reality.
That's the sober reality, and that's what you must do.
Okay, but still on oil, one of the things that I think is quite interesting is that now that
on oil.
Go ahead.
Remember, in 2022, the countries, while the rest of the world was struggling with recessions, about 5 or 6 countries benefited mainly in terms of output, GDP, and balance of trade. Who are those? Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Angola, all those oil-producing countries. Nigeria is supposed to be an oil producer, but did not benefit because of the oil theft. So you didn't benefit, but you also paid the cost of, right? So, again, your structural defects in the economy and your mispricing of your factor prices has led to this outcome. So the consequence of primitive understanding of economics, right, has become so debilitating, right? So we need to have that brain, that shift, right? So I hope you understand what I'm saying. Thank you.
Interesting point. Okay, so again, still on oil, and maybe you can try and clarify and explain this to me. Over the last, at least until recently, Nigeria was producing north of 1.6 million barrels per day, sometimes well over 2 million barrels per day. And then we saw, for example, the currency relatively stable during that time. We have seen some weakness recently as that oil production has fallen. But, and this is again to the point that I made earlier about Nigeria not necessarily being an oil economy, is that the economy is so much bigger now. So that's 1.2 or whatever it is may feel like maybe we were producing 600,000 12 years ago. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about, is there something that is not fully reflecting? Is there something that suggests that the pain is not fully reflected right now? Because given that decline in oil production, given the size of the economy, I would have thought that the ripple effect should be more significant, but it's still been relatively stable.
Well, you make a very, very good point. I think, first of all, let me, short of boring you, because my economics, my intellectuals are sitting behind me, so I hope I'm right. The difference between gross domestic product and net national product is that your gross domestic product, which is your GDP, it includes everything we produce here, including what Ben and foreigners and everybody produces here, right? And that is divided by the number of people in the country, and you get your GDP. The net national product means that what Nigerians produce overseas and what Nigerians produce here, less what foreigners produce here, right? So if I've stolen $10 billion and it's out there in Paris, right? Whatever I earn, that is captured together with what is here. So what you are saying is that the net national income of Nigeria is much, much higher than the gross domestic product, because the net national product income actually includes stolen monies and all the illicit flows, narcotics and all. So when you divide that by, right, and those monies are not stuck there. Those monies are finding their ways and the interest on it coming back here to support people here. So visiting friends and relatives in December and all sorts of people flying, the beneficiaries of immoral earnings in Italy and all of that are sending their returns back here. All of that, when you pile all of that together, and that is what is supporting the economy. So if you continue using the data of GDP, which does not include the informal economy, which means that you have to increase your GDP by about 30 or 40%, then you add the net national product, which is what includes both the moral and immoral earnings of Nigerians overseas, add it to this, you find that that is what is keeping it going. And there's data to show that in the last 10 years, what has been earned from Nollywood, from music, Burna Boy and all these guys coming here, which normally they were coming into the pool. So the central bank had the benefit of using the oil money, the gas money, and the flows, and that kept the currency stable. Once you put in these draconian rules and those monies went the other way, then all you had, all that was available to manage through the normal process was this that is limited here. So no matter what we did, because that money had gone bypassed the economy, we had to deal with this smaller pool, which we were rationing and allocating and all of that. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy of death. It was a race to the bottom. So what do you need to do? Lift it, come back, so that all those monies come together. And when you put the two monies together, you'll find that your exchange rate will be stable. And
I think it's a very interesting point. So obviously there was an attempt to capture more of the informal economy when the GDP was rebased and so forth.
Yeah.
But it does appear that there's still a huge informal economy that is impacting the currency and that's not necessarily being captured.
And you see, informality and formality, there are two things. One, you can capture it, but it has tax implications.
Right.
So what you do is that once you have VAT and all these taxes, which is benefit taxes, which are inequitable normally, but it generates a lot of revenue, that will help do it. So it's not easy for whoever is going to be the president and the team, because when you get there, you know that things are very complex, and that there are no easy answers, and that the only way out is to take on your vested interests and say, come, we've got here now. Take this, take that, go and sin no more, but leave us to do our job.
All right. Okay, so we're going to obviously take this to the audience, but I want to actually start with the online audience. So I have a couple of questions here for you. So that we can take more of them. These ones I will sort of take them to some extent like a rapid fire type approach. In other words, relatively short answers. So the first one is, Helen is asking, what are the clear indicators, in your view, that Nigeria won't go into a recession like the rest of the world this year?
One, a recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Some people say that. Some people say, okay, if your growth slows for 2 quarters. But that's not the most important thing is this, that firstly, it's difficult to fall when you're on the ground already. So the normal way is upwards. And it's difficult to also fall once there's a change, right? You're on the ground and there's a change, so there's a good time to, right? So if you look at post-conflict economies like Rwanda, Ivory Coast and all that, they do very well. So whilst we don't have physical conflict, although we have physical conflict in terms of terrorism, we are at the bottom. So we are likely to, and you are measuring the output of last quarter with the output of this quarter. Right. So I think there was some positive growth. Okay. Right. So 2, what are the consequences of a recession? Recession is not just growth. It means that high unemployment, high corporate mortality, weakness in the banking system, and so on and so forth. That is it. So if you go into recession and then you have all of these consequences, then you have to deal with the negative outcomes, right, of this. So you got to look at it. It's not, again, one of the problems that we manage indicators rather than managing the economy. Oh, what's inflation, what's this? The point is that the economy must be growing. Once you are growing and creating jobs, then all these other indicators are just, pieces of paper. They're good for the economic classroom, not for the, right?
Okay. I have 2 questions here related to the FX market. I'm sure you expected questions here. Will there rather be a convergence of the FX for both the parallel and official market? Do you see a convergence of the multiple exchange rates or further devaluation? So any comment on the outlook for the currency?
No, I think 2 things. Convergence, if one was 500 and the other one was 100, and this one moves to 105 and the other one moves to 495, you are converging, right? But the goal is unification, right? Okay, so let's not confuse convergence and unification. If, for example, you had 20% in mathematics last term and you had 25% this term, you have still failed, but you have done better, right? So I think, let's get that clear, because people just bandy in terms around without knowing what it means. And convergence, it is not the rate, it is the mechanism for determining the rate. We could converge at 1,000 or unify at 1,000. We could also unify. So the pound-dollar rate, last time I checked, it was about a few years ago before Brexit, it was 1.6, 1.5. Before then, it was almost 2. Now, after Liz Truss thing, it came to 1.02, but then now it's gone all the way back to about 1.15, 1.20. The euro, of course, went all the way. So there's nothing sacrosanct about the rates. It is the mechanism. So basically what you look at the parameters of your trading partners. If those things are changing, then to become competitive, so we have the resources, right? The intellectual resources to do that. It's a simple model. You just, every day they come out and tell you that, okay, then you know at what rate to intervene and how much money you have to put in and how much money you have to, but once it's free, money is coming in and money is going out. So your work is simple. If you have the policy framework, and you adjust accordingly.
But I guess the question is, do you think it will happen? Because we've been like this over the last 3 years.
No, it has no. You have no choice. It will happen. I don't care what happens.
This year? You know, we are the oracle, so we have to ask you.
It will happen. I think it will start happening this quarter.
This quarter, that's soon?
Yep.
Okay, let's see. All right, another question. Do you see the opening of Dangote refineries impacting the Naira exchange rate positively in 2023? Is there something that is that an opportunity around that?
No, I think first and foremost, there's a complete misunderstanding of how this, because the oil that we're sending out to be refined for us is oil that we would have earned dollars on. So we give it to Trafigura, Vitol, and others. They refine it and they bring it back. So it's like cocks and bucks. You send it out, you bring it in. It doesn't change anything. It's only you save the refining and the transportation cost, which is marginal. So again, they say it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive. So you are free to think that because the refinery is open, then all of a sudden Nigeria's problem will be solved. Sorry, that's not the answer. It's not going to happen.
So what do we gain from the refinery?
No, you gain because you are doing 600,000 barrels. Maybe at best you use 300,000 barrels or 200,000 barrels locally. You will export all of those things. Yes. You earn dollars from the export of, and you get more from exporting a refined product than exporting crude, than other things. So, but I think what has happened is that between 1966 and 67 to now, we've become a natural wealth economy. We are used to just sharing and spending money that we didn't earn. But the transition to a produced wealth economy, where before 1966, we produced cocoa, rubber, and all these things. So it is what the man who exports the timber, who gets his money, can decide what to do with his dollars, do everything. And those are the rich men, the merchants, Ojuku, Saboro, and all these other people. Now, what you found is that you had all this emergency oil lifting people and all of the oil blocks became the fourth. That you are going to go back full cycle, like what's happening in Indonesia and other places. You now, the emphasis will be on produced wealth and natural wealth, not either or. It's not a binary choice.
The point you make about the refinery is interesting because I think all along everyone has thought if we have the refinery, we use local crude, we don't have to import, so we're not spending on imports. So there should be some benefit there.
But it's not as much. First of all, you see...
But we import a lot. If
no,
I'm
you're
not mistaken,
no, you're not importing.
It's the number one item in terms of
it is your crude that is going there, that is a swap arrangement. Your oil that... And what's more interesting, please note that the oil, there are three types of assets. There's the land and swamp, which is joint venture. There's the offshore, which is, right? And then you have the deep water, which is what you call all of these are production sharing contracts. Okay. The oil that you are sending out, right? The oil that you are sending out for swaps, right, is the oil from the more lucrative field, which is the the JVs. So the way to see it is that 100 barrels of oil comes out of the JV, okay. 60 barrels goes to Nigeria, yes. And 40 barrels stays with Shell or ELF, right? Then, but if you go to the offshore, right, 100 barrels come out, only 30 barrels goes to Nigeria, 70 barrels goes to because there's no cash call on that one. And in the deep water, which is the one that is very far, where the capital cost is very high, of the 100 barrels that comes out, only 20 comes to Nigeria, 80 goes to... So when you say you are producing 1.6 million barrels, and of this 1.6 million barrels, 800,000 barrels are from the joint venture, of which you are using 500 to go and swap for refining, what is left is only 300,000 barrels.
So we're going to lose some oil revenue.
Oh, significant.
And then we'll gain in terms of not spending to import. That's the point you're making.
No, but you are not spending to import. All you are spending.
So I'm spending dollars to import.
No, it is you are swapping your crude, which you would have given you dollars.
Yes, that's my
for
point.
Refined. So that's what's happening. It doesn't change. The picture doesn't change. But you see, it's good to make people feel at least temporarily happy. You know, it's like giving that patient who's in pain morphine to keep him, to kill the pain until the pain goes, then,
I think that the whole Dangote refinery coming on stream conversation is one that needs to be dissected.
No, it's a crisis of what's expectations.
Because,
right?
What is the gain? If
There's
we're
a
not,
gain.
So the gain is what?
The gain is that crude that was going all the way to Rotterdam.
Yes.
Right? That crude comes all the way to Ekpe.
Yes. It's just moving. The distance is less.
And secondly, it's being refined here, and therefore right?
There's more available here.
All right. So
hopefully.
all those tank farms and all these other guys, that's it. Those businesses die immediately, right? And then you
the
can.
The Oracle has spoken.
Right. No, but that's the reality.
Okay.
The people that were selling recharge cards on the bridge, once there was the technology of mobile payment, that was the end.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to take some questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please raise up your hands. A microphone will be brought to you, and we would be happy to take your contribution to this conversation. While we wait for that, we still have more questions from the online community. Still on the oil sector. With Saudi Arabia moving away from the US dollar in terms of oil sales to China, what's the near-term and long-term implications of the greenback, and what's the opportunity for Nigeria within the much-touted concept of Global South, BRICS, etc.?
Well, Saudi Arabia is what you call posturing and reality. Saudi Arabia the Saudi regime cannot survive one more hour without the support of the U.S. in terms of all of this. So this, what you call it, MSN or whatever the name, that guy after what happened in Turkey and all that, there's been posturing, right? And everybody took the opportunity. 75% of global transactions are settled in the US dollar. New York is the most important financial center in the world, after which London comes. The reason why the Second World War was won, and the moment after you had the Bretton Woods, America made it very clear the dollar will become the major reserve currency in the world. 1, 2, the payment system of the world will rotate around the dollar and the U.S. financial architecture. And 3, it was very simple. The IMF, the World Bank headquarters will be in Washington, and the president of the World Bank will always be a U.S. citizen. The Europeans will head the IMF, and then the United Nations will have secretary generals from all over the place. It's as simple. The Ukraine war was to reaffirm that situation, that was it. When they cut off SWIFT, cut off all these things. I want to refer all of you to a book called The Age of Turbulence, written by Alan Greenspan, and what he went through in the plane. He was on a flight going from Geneva to New York when 9/11 happened. And in the first chapter where he reflected on the consequences of going to the World Trade Center and what it meant for, one, the global economy, and two, the U.S. economy, you will know that these things, you can't just wake up one day and say, oh yes, we are going to have Chinese yuan, SDR. The Naira one swap, what has it brought to you? People are buying dollars to buy the yuan and all that. If I want to buy anything from Ghana, I have to buy dollars to pay for cities, right? So
there's too much at stake for Washington to allow things to just change.
Why are there bases in Taiwan? Why are there bases in Seoul in Korea? Why are there bases in Frankfurt? Why are there? Anytime somebody is captured or returned from Russian detention, they first take the person to Frankfurt for checking and all that before they fly the person to the U.S. So let's not, you see, one of my electives was in geopolitics, and I understand the nexus between geopolitics and economics. So I won't deceive myself by trying to say that China.
All right.
Look, Janet Yellen came into Africa this week and went to 3 countries, right, before going to Davos. What were those 3 countries? Senegal, Zambia, and South Africa. And what was the purpose of the visit? The purpose of the visit was to counter the Road and Belt Initiative of the Chinese in Africa.
Enough said. Okay. Do we have any questions in the room? Okay, we have a few hands towards the middle. Please, can we give the gentleman there in the... Yes, thank you. Please, if you can be very brief so we can take as many questions as possible.
Okay,
introduce yourself and then...
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bismarck. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dio from KPMG. My question is with respect to taxation. Recently, the finance minister made reference to the fact that Nigeria is giving away so much incentives, and there has been more concentration on taxation, of course, because we have a revenue challenge. The question is, how do we then motivate investments? Or let me put it this way: I would have thought that to motivate investments, you give some incentives here and there, but of course we also have the challenge of revenue. And we've seen that they've been introducing sin taxes, excise on services, even in the finance bill that is about to be signed.
Right.
There have been a lot of reference to trying to get more tax revenue, but I see a mismatch, and I don't know how you view it. Do you motivate investments by giving away some incentives here and there, or do you then tax the existing
to raise the revenue.
Companies to raise the revenue? Thank you.
How do we see that dilemma for the government?
I don't think it's a dilemma as such, but I think corporate bodies evaluate their total tax bill from levies, signage, all these things you put together. So my total tax is both local, there's tariffs, rates, and all of that, and taxes, corporate taxes, and all of that. Then you put it and you tack it along what you are getting. We pay personal income tax in Lagos, we pay this, we pay that. We also buy water and the tankers. So what are you getting in return for the taxes you pay? And in addition to that, you also pay all sorts of extortion, and so. But whether we like it or not, we are moving towards a much more efficient tax system. Because people are now beginning to ask questions, what am I paying for? Let's have receipts, let's do it electronically rather than paying all sorts of agents here and there. And I think that it's a work in progress. I think that the basic principles of taxation, which are 4 canons, right, according to Adam Smith: equitable, neutral, administrative, and revenue generating. But the more, so you have income taxes and you have benefit taxes. If you charge benefit taxes like VAT, petrol, this alcohol tax, sugar tax, and all these things, the man who has 10 naira, 100 naira salary a month will pay the same tax on that benefit as Aliko Dangote, right? So that's regressive. But it's easy to collect, easy to administer. You don't have to start getting tax consultant to fill a form for you. And so in Nigeria, we are shifting more towards the benefit approach, which gives us revenue. And one. But two, the question is, what has the revenue been used for? So there's a psychological part of it that if I pay all these taxes and I get no benefit, then the incentive not to pay or to avoid taxes becomes higher. So the moral here is that we have to know that the people who are paying these taxes are expecting some things in return. The other taxes which you do not see, which is very important, and I've checked, studies have revealed that in state governments, you know, they say IGR, this, blah, blah, blah. The shakedown taxes, right? Because the state governments are they are carrying out shakedowns, right? In the motor parks and the market stalls and all that, the monies that come out of those structures, those informal structures, aggregated, right, comes to a big, big sum. So when you are driving on this Lekki Expressway and you see all those people in the yellow buses, all those enforcers knocking it, they are collecting money. And those monies are going all the way back to traditional rulers and the political machine. Well, this basically, it's happening in Lagos, it's happening in Benin, in Ibadan, Kano, everywhere. That's the name of the game. It's Chicago machine politics, right? So that money is there. And so the reform of the tax system is a big work in progress. And the owners, 2023 and since 2020, all the elections that have been held, you find that the emphasis is not just on projects, it's about delivery of service and liberating people from the shackles of this extortion. It happened in Edo State, it happened in Osun State, and Anambra State. And when the guy in Osun State was, every question they asked in the debate, all they said is that we are not going to be sending our money to somebody else, we'll take it. That was his answer. As far as he was concerned, those taxes that are being collected and siphoned, right, are going to be collected. How you use it is another story altogether. So I hear you, but the point is that tax formula and tax mobilization, the electronic process and all of that is making tax collection more efficient. Incentives, when we looked at the incentives versus returns, the more the incentives we gave, the less what they call this EEG, something export grant, we call it a racket. But in fairness, the swap of tax for projects, if the federal government had awarded that contract from Bagada to Apapa, and the swap transaction they did when Dangote did, that road is, I don't know what the pricing and the exchange ratio is, but as far as I know is that once I hit Bagada, to all the way to the airport, no stories, right? Whether they awarded contract 1 trillion or what, I have a road. Whether it's raining or not raining, if you did the same on Lagos, Ibadan, and whatever you guys are doing, you do whatever it is, but just give me a road, so I can in fact, that's my answer.
Thank you for that contribution. Can we go to the gentleman over there? And then if we can also take one from the student. We have a lady. Okay, I see you, sir. We'll come back to you in a bit.
Okay, good morning. My name is Kevin YB. I'm the Managing Director for the Edo State Investment Promotion Office, the Oracle. I'm quite interested in the invisible sector, most especially diaspora flows. Why do our analysis in 2017? At the time, and diaspora remittances into Nigeria was $22 billion. Edo got about $6 billion. But it went into consumption and construction. Now, looking into 2022, that has dipped a bit because of the COVID. Now we have it as $20 billion. How do we now, would you say, get the diaspora to start to somehow invest some of these monies and not just construction, because that is what they are telling us. What would be the kind of structure so that it can impact positively on the economy? The other one, it's you mentioned the investment opportunities, manufacturing trade. The gap I was looking at was how would this relate to the African Continental Free Trade Area, knowing fully well we are heavily dependent on importation and we want Forex. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to you, sir, let's take one more question so that we can perhaps sweep the room and then we'll get all the responses. I'll be taking note of them.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zainab Taubade, and I'm a student of Vivian Fowler Memorial College for Girls. You said the higher the rate of income inequality, the higher the insecurity experienced in that country. My question is, how will Nigeria achieve the economic goal of equitable distribution of income, especially with the level of corruption being faced?
Thank you very much for your question. Very articulate. Can we have the microphone here? I just wanted to sweep the room because we're running out of time.
What's her name?
Zainab. I have the names.
Okay.
I have the names.
Let me just...
You want to quickly speak to that?
Yeah.
Okay, please, can we have the microphone here while he speaks to that point?
Zainab, good morning. Thank you very much. I like your question. And secondly, I like the way your thinking process. So I think the future, you make us proud that the future is here. Now, the inequality of income. The question my friend from KPMG asked was, how do we use income taxes? Because how do we use income taxes to actually create, use it for revenues, improve it, and get things done? Your question is, how do we deal with income inequality? How do we distribute income? So the first thing I want you to know is that, first of all, you can, if the cake is not big enough, there won't be enough to share, right? So what has happened is that because the cake has been shrinking in Nigeria and the number of people at the table are increasing, the battle to eat this smaller cake has become vicious and there's not enough. And what happens is that the barons will still take their own. So if, for example, the cake was 100 grams.
100 pieces of meat.
No. That's the cake was 100 grams. Huh? The barons, and then all of a sudden it becomes, before the barons used to take 50, and the others will share 50. If it becomes 80,
that the barons
will take their 50.
Oh, okay.
And what's left for you?
It's now 30.
30. It is that battle for the 30 is the one that says, okay, if I cannot get, then I'll have to go and fight the baron who has had 50. So the baron goes around with his bodyguards and bulletproof and all those things. So I think that the whole idea is that, one, income has to grow. Two, the distribution of income is if we don't distribute it equitably, and the only way to distribute it equitably is to make sure that there are taxes, and the taxes are used to produce health, education, and feeding facilities for the poor, right? Because it's not just what the money you take; it is even the money you earn and what you spend it on, right? Vivian Fowler is one of the elite schools, right? But the guy out there in that school, the Jaconde school out there, needs, if you improve it, if you improve the general hospital rather than Reddington can be doing its thing, but the general hospitals are going, then you find that the income of the ordinary man has actually increased because he's spending less on those things, because it's an aspirational society. So you must use those things to provide the basic things for, like Jaconde and Awolowo thought about in the past. Let's do this, life, plenty for all, life more abundant, or I don't know what the action group motto was in those days. But that was the philosophy, right? It wasn't about barons stealing money. It was about providing service.
But if I can interject, I think the point she's making is that because of the stigma of corruption, it seems like there's just no way this cycle is going to continue.
No.
I think that's her concern.
How
do we address this inequality if corruption is still as pervasive?
You see, every society goes through that transition. It happened in Ghana with Rawlings and all of that. It happened in France in the French Revolution, the ancien regime, the guillotines and all of that. You see, there's the aristocracy, there's the middle class, which is called the bourgeoisie, and there's the peasants, right? What has happened here, or what's happening here, is that the aristocracy have taken care of themselves, the middle class have been wiped out, and the peasants and the middle class have all merged into the disenfranchised and the marginalized people in the world, the fringe players. That cannot survive. I'm saying that the new government or the new leadership cannot survive longer than this if you don't do something about it. If not, those who make peaceful change impossible make violent change inevitable.
I agree. Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Let's take your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Yemi Adefulu. I am a lawyer. Lately, I have been defending you because I'm also a politician. Your name came up as one of the possible governors of the central bank.
Oh, no. Sorry.
He said your name came up.
I said your name came up.
No,
and then somebody said that you were the one preparing manifestos for different political parties.
They said so.
And I said that couldn't be. The question I want to ask is on geopolitics. Because we run a wrong constitutional structure, in my view. We knew what the situation was when we had a true federal system. You didn't mention this area, but what is the place of a true federal structure, less concentrated at the center as we have now, for an economic turnaround? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Okay, just to remind you of the first question, it was about trying to get more investments from diaspora as opposed to just...
Okay, yes, Edo State.
Yes,
No,
Edo State made that point. And then also about the Africa Common Free Trade Area.
No, I think that diaspora flows. You don't bring diaspora flows and use it for construction. The diaspora flows come into a pool. So if, for example, when we had the Western Union, you walked into that place and sent your dollars, First Bank held it here, somebody took Naira here. The dollars go into the central bank. Central bank looks at it, and at the same time, British Airways wants to remit its ticket, Emirates wants... It's part of that they use to pay. It's not that there's a pool that diaspora flows come in and they use it for construction. It provides a pool of foreign currency available to both government and individuals to meet their international requirements. So the external reserves of a country are not the assets of the federal government of Nigeria. They are a pool of monies so that the Central Bank of Nigeria, anybody who wants to, if you want to travel, you want to pay school fees, or you just apply, or if you have to apply, and it goes out, and you come back in. When you say the diaspora flows are up to 22 billion, in fact, the projection for this year and next year is maybe about $26 to $27 billion. The projection for oil revenues that will come into the country is about almost 38 or $48 billion. So if I take the diaspora flows that are accounted for, if I take all the concerts that our people go and all the other things, you will find that the oil and gas money is probably almost equal to whatever these monies are coming in, and it all comes into the pool. So at the end of the year, both the dividends remitted from companies overseas and all of that here will come to this big amount. What the central bank will say, okay, for those who are importing things, this. For those who are remitting dividends, MTN, Airtel, and others, that, Guinness. For this, so, and that's what happened. They manage the resources of the people. That is what it is. It's not a rocket science, right? So, and that's what they've been doing. But you see, the unfortunate thing is that once you start putting restrictions and people don't bring their money in, that pool gets smaller. And then the battle to survive amongst the others becomes vicious. And then people begin to offer, because the price of the currency is no longer reflecting its value, people begin to offer under the table, and then becomes a vicious cycle, right? And I remember clearly when, as a kid, when Chief Awolowo, as the Minister of Finance, decided to introduce exchange control into Nigeria because of, and he said privately that that was the worst day in his life because he knows that the easiest thing to do is to introduce, he introduced three things. One, he issued a bond, to Civil War bond. He also changed the currency to, I think, pound, not naira, Nigerian pound as against, because the British went and devalued their currency. And the third thing was I introduced exchange control. And he said that if this thing I'm doing today, even when the situation changes, which is supposed to change immediately after the Civil War, that it will be impossible to correct it because once people have got used to the corruption in it, it will take generations, right? And Awolowo never spoke very glibly. He was not a flippant person. Like he said that I will leave Nigeria in darkness, I'll come back to meet it in darkness. So he made that comment and said that this thing, I regret it, but we have to do it. But I can tell you that it will take generations because it becomes a way of, becomes profit for people and becomes a vested interest. I can. The rest, as I say, is history.
The question on federalism? The place of true federalism in moving the...
So I think I've answered the Edo State that the diaspora flows will come there, and then it's not government money. It is you will still raise your revenue to do your construction. True federalism, you see, the political structure and the economic structure have to be consistent. The political structure has power at the center coming down, while the economic structure has revenues, oil revenue and everything coming from the bottom up. So you expropriated the oil revenue rather than saying that whoever is doing oil, do whatever you like, but pay 90% tax like they do in the US, right? You now took it as an asset of the government, right? So as long as the people are at the bottom, at the base, at the state, local government level, while the power, so we call it the inverted pyramid of power. The base of the people are here, but then the power, right? The bulk of the power is at the top, and that tiny peak of that triangle, and the other way around. That is an unholy situation. So if you synchronize the power flow with the economic flow, which is what you are saying, that whether it's parliamentary or whatever it is, the federal, central government cedes a lot of things to the bottom, restructure it. And I remember vividly that after Abacha and Abiola died, and I had the benefit of listening to Chief Tony Enaro, and he said that if you rush into this, your constitution, right? He refused to come back to Nigeria initially. If you rush into, if you don't use the de Klerk model with Mandela to build a constitutional consensus, it's a recipe for disaster. It will consume, and you guys are actually planting the seeds of the next civil conflict. He said it openly and said it privately. So there's nothing that we are seeing here that has not been seen by those who could see. And It's just a fulfilling of the prophecies that is what it is. I mean, unfortunately, that's what it is.
Thank you very much. I think we unfortunately have run out of time. I can see more hands up, but several. There are actually several. And we should take one more question. Okay. See, by popular demand. Okay, 2 more questions. I've been told we can take 2 more questions. Yes, I'll come to you, sir. I see you. It's not working. Sorry, the microphone isn't working.
Okay, thank you. My name is Niriti Adebayo. I'm CEO of White Cleon Limited, a human resource consulting, outsourcing, and HR automation company.
And I'm chairman of White Cleon.
Thank you, sir.
Full disclosure, eh?
I want to talk a bit about gender-lens investing. I believe it's noteworthy to know that men have greater access to funds, credits, and investment. And you would see that in the last couple of years, women have started having their angel investor groups, and I belong to quite a few of it. Now, is it possible, or can you see in the foreseeable future the government supporting, more women investment groups instead of just posturing, because we see a lot of them talk about gender lens and not investing and all that. So is that ever going to happen? And what do you think, or how do you think we can do better in terms of bringing more women together to support women?
So before you answer the question, sir, can I just take the second one so that we can round up after this? Please, can we bring the microphone this way?
Thank you, and good morning, the Oracle. My name is Tony Atta. I'm a retiree, and I'm hoping you'll be our chairman soon. First of all, let me thank you for the very enlightening presentation and very eye-opening. As a retiree, you understand my interest in inflation. You mentioned Ghana, we've seen over 50%. You talked about the struggle in Egypt. 2 weeks ago, I was in Lebanon. When I arrived, I wanted to change just $300. I went online and checked. Online, it was 1,500 to $1 US. So when I called up, they said it was 42,000. I said, what do you mean by that? It says 1 to 1,500. So for the 2,000 for somebody bringing his money to spend and exit, I felt okay. But then I said, what's it online? Say, yeah, that was. When you talk about unification of rates, say that was the rate.
You have 12 rates in Lebanon.
Doesn't exist anymore.
There are 12 exchange rates in Lebanon.
But by the time I was ready to change my money between 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock, it was 44,000. So you see that kind of situation. You see Egypt, you see Ghana, you see these invisible funds that has decoupled from helping us to balance. But you're still very optimistic. Help me a little bit as a retiree.
Thank you. And I really like the points he's making about inflation, because I actually had a question, but I thought we didn't have time. Because you mentioned in your presentation that you felt it will peak in the first quarter. And I was wondering if you had also taken into account potentially the impact of subsidy removal or...
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll come back. But first and foremost, the Lebanese economy, total GDP is about $56 billion. It's not up to, it's about a third of the Lagos economy in terms of size. Right? Lebanon has been, I think, 7 or 8 times in history, Beirut has been burnt to ashes and all that. They have phalanges, they have Hezbollah, and other things. So that may not be a good example. Egypt, called the Gaza Strip, and they have a lot of support from America to keep it. So like I said, reform is necessary but not sufficient. You need strong institutions, you need so many other things. And you need to be lucky too, because in the last, Ghana was going and coasting, everything was good, or it's still good actually, but COVID and Ukraine, and also they did that crazy deal with the crazy deal, which they swapped Ashanti gold, they sold forward and all that. So now, so it's much more complex than that. But in the end, your politics has to be right, your economics has to be right, and so many things. And it's again the indicators. Oh, Ghanaian inflation is 54. Our inflation is 21.7, but the real inflation rate is about 45, 46, 47%.
That's Nigeria.
Nigeria, and that's
non-food, food, or just
no. When you use a synthetic basket, different from, because the basket that's been used was last reconstituted in 2009, and you have to reconstitute it every 5 years. So we are 15 years past due for a reconstitution of the basket. So 1, 2. Okay, the unemployment numbers you see today are 2020 numbers, and it was the one in the middle of COVID, one shot. They asked you a question: Are you employed? Are you not employed? I'm not. So we can't rely on that. So data integrity is another big issue, right? Right. So I think that is extremely important that you know that it's when you are making examples, you have to look at those economies. The other economies, the French-speaking economies who are supported by the, and what are they achieving? But also when you look at total subsidy amount of petroleum products in Cameroon, right? And it comes to a particular level, and Cameroon's population is maybe, I think, about a quarter of ours or a fifth of ours. So multiply by 5, right? And you find that your subsidy is still 10 times more than that factor. Whether I like it or not, beer has been there for 45 years or 50 years. Well, it doesn't get in the way of anything. It gets, and the economies run autopilot. They've solved their power thing. They're able to host the African Nations Cup and all that. So you can have a leadership that doesn't get in the way, and you will achieve things. You can have a leadership that is obstructive, right? You can have a leadership that is also doesn't get in the way, but is a sponge, sticky fingers, and so that could be a problem, right? So you have to look at all of these things together before you make that decision. But the thing is that because the people are very hungry, people are becoming impatient, it is important. Even the sticky fingers will run away from stealing things because the people will not allow you. So the time is now. The time is now. There's no question about it. My thing on inflation, that why inflation, you see, inflation measures the pace of increase in prices. And the big thing about inflation is output versus money. So our money supply growth today is about 21, 22%. Our GDP growth is 2 or 3%. Subtract one from the other. It tells you the first base of inflation. 21 minus 3 gives you 8. Then you add the exchange rate devaluation impact. You add this. It's not a rocket science. You just bring out your blackboard and do it. You can tell what the inflation will be. So every time my experts are there, they do the regression. They tell me that how they do it, I don't know, but they tell me that it's going to be 21 point. Bingo. The next month, when they announce it, it's the same thing. All they do, they go to Teju Osho. Sorry. They go to Oyingbo. Oyingbo market. Teju Osho is distorted. Oyingbo market gives you Oyingbo market. Then the other distorted market is Sangros, but Oyingbo gives you Oyingbo, and Mile 12 give you the feel of the real price because that's where the products come from. And then I know what the price of rice, I know what the price of a tin of sardine is, I know the price of Oloyin and Olotu beans, I know all those things. So I can tell you, right? So little kids like Zainab, when they will go to the market and do the analysis, they do it. And then they say, that's what it is. So the truth is that why are prices? The price came down in December because of 4 things. One, the price of diesel dropped from 815 to around 750, 780. The exchange rate appreciated. The flood effect ended, right? And then something else that happened. This imported food stuff because of the price of wheat and others started coming down. So we saw that marginal. But it didn't mean that prices came down. It meant that the rate of increase slowed. So if the price of bread was 100 naira in 2021 and there was 10% inflation, it became 110 naira. If there's a 5% inflation in the following month, it doesn't mean that it's 100. It will go 5% of 110, right? So the price of a bag of flour was 15,000. It went to 18,000. Today it's 34,000 naira a bag. Whether you like it or not, that's what it is. And because the price of bread has increased, I mean the bread, 75 or 80% of the bread input is flour and sugar, but diesel. Because the thing about when you are baking, once you put the dough into the oven, if they take light and you stop, then that's it. You lose everything. So before you start putting your dough in the tray and all that, 2 generators are running at the same time. So, and that's what it is. So when the price of diesel went from 200 all the way to 800, the bread went from 600, 700, 800, 1,200. That's it. So it's not a rocket science. This is everyday. The best economists in this country are the women in Oyinbo market. They tell you, sorry, this doesn't pay. We can't sell at this price. And nobody goes to tell them what the price of tomato is. The market works efficiently.
All right. There was also the question that she asked about support for
women. Okay, yes.
Women, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yesterday, just anecdotally.
You can make it really brief, sir, because
yes,
we are really running.
Anecdotally, they were talking about, I saw the University of Lagos had a vice chancellor who is a lady, very strong, and she got all sorts of awards. Then they flew back to the University of Benin. I saw that was another lady. So I said, wow, okay. Maybe the chance of becoming a vice chancellor in Nigeria is higher, the gender. Well, there's no presidential candidate who is a woman. There's governors. I haven't seen a female governor. Only one female governor happened after Peter Obi was impeached. Yes, there's a lot of visibility. But again, this is what do you call it? In sociology, we call it, you have the matriarchal and the other part. So you have the patronage and all of that. So I have not seen any Kabiyesi Oba who is a woman yet. And I've not seen, right? So we will get there, yes, but the women are beginning to assert themselves in authority and all that. In corporate world, we have chief executives. We have, in fact, the democratic process has made it very interesting, and we are seeing. President is a female. But also, I noticed that during the time they were charging people for fraudulent transactions, there was equal gender split among the female. So I thought I'd just throw that in.
Thank you very much.
So in the world of illicit transactions, there was no gender discrimination. Yes. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, you know that he's tracking the inflation numbers when he knows the difference between Olo1 and Oloyin. So thank you so much, sir. Please, another round of applause for him. I think on that note, I will invite Sajini.
We appreciate Mr. B.J. Rwani and Wole Famurewa once more. That was BJ's A-grade performance as usual. And Wole did so well anchoring the event. The next item on the agenda is to have presentation of gifts to both Mr. B.J. Rwani and Mr. Wole Famurewa. I'll invite the President and Chairman of Council, Ms. Bisi Adeyemi, to do the honors. May we appreciate our President as she comes forward. Mr. Arwani, appreciation from the chamber. She has to be there for pictures.
Obliging us. Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Then we have Mr. Olifamoro as well to receive a present from Madam President. Pictures. Now, ahead of the vote of thanks by the chairperson of the Advocacy Committee, there's order of photographs, starting with the President, Mr. B.J. Rawani, Mr. Olifamoro, our representative of our sponsors, Sterling Bank and FCMB. Could you come forward for pictures? B.J. Wally? Wally? Our sponsors, FCMB, Sterling Bank, could you join them? Could you do this very quickly? FCMB, Sterling. One representative from each organization. Of course, the next. Yes. We have a couple of pictures, so we need to do that very, very quickly. I implore both each of Madam President, the Speaker, and the moderators to still stay behind. The next picture is with the Deputy Presidents of the Chamber. Our sponsors, could you return, please? Please return. Sponsors, return, please. Deputy Presidents of the Chamber, could you join them, please? VP Atali, Prince Olashere. Sterling. Yes. Oh, is it the same person? Okay. The next set of pictures, the three musketeers should still remain. President, the Speaker, and the Moderator. Our sponsors still should remain. Past presidents and patrons should join them, please. Sponsor. It seems our sponsor is camera shy. He's returning to his seat. He shouldn't return. Our past presidents and patrons should join them. Could you move it to that side so that we could cover? Yes. Yep. So after this, we release our sponsors to go take their seats. Okay. Thank you for the honor. Thanks to our sponsors as they exit. The next group of pictures, President, the Speaker, the Moderator, and members of ESCO. ESCO members, President, Mr. Arwani, and the Moderator. Next pictures. Could we have ESCO members take their seat? Next, President, the Speaker, the Moderator, and Council members. Members of Council. Yes. The next set, the President, the Speaker, the Moderator, Chairman of Programs Committee, PSG, and Advocacy Committee. Next, members of Programs Committee, PSG, and Advocacy Committee. The members, in addition with the chairman, members of those three committees, they are the organizers. May I invite Ms. Anne Renu, the chairman of the Advocacy Committee, to give the vote of thanks. May we appreciate Ms. Renu as she comes forward.
Okay, good morning. Good morning. Can we settle down? Mine is an easier job, but an important one. Appreciations and communicating events within the Nbcc. My name is Anne Renu. And on behalf of the chamber, sorry, can we have some quiet? Thank you. Right, on behalf of the chamber, I'd like to thank, first of all, our speaker, Mr. B.J. Riwani, as for his ebullient, impactful, insightful presentation. I think we all have some relevance that we can pick up from the presentations as it influences our businesses. Thank you to the moderator, Mr. Wole Famori. Within the Nbcc, the 2023 trade mission to the United Kingdom, in particular London and Birmingham, is scheduled for the 21st to the 27th of May this year. So please let's put that in our diary. Very, very important trade mission. The delegates who have been in the past can attest to the fact that they've been very, very successful and influenced their business growth and performance. Interested individuals or corporates are invited to participate and contact the Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce. There's a call for application to the Nbcc Programming Academy. This remains open for qualified, interested candidates. Well, on my script here, it says both male and female, I'd imagine so, who want to begin or advance in the world of technology. So you can visit the Chamber's website or any of its social media handles to register. There's another call for nomination as a mentee or mentor of the Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce Next Generation Leaders Program. You can visit the website again and its social media handles. And this has really been a very, very successful program, particularly as we focus on the next generation. And finally, just to mention the fact that we have this beautiful plaza. It's now open fully for business. State-of-the-art facilities are available. You can inquire, you can actually book, and you can hold your corporate events, training, seminars, etc. It's really at an affordable rate. Again, inquiries through the chamber headquarters or even online to book your reservations. So if you're interested in becoming a member of the chamber, please visit our website, www.nbcc.org.ng, or meet with any of the membership team for those who are here physically, and you can do the same thing online. Again, thank you very much and have a good afternoon. Happy New Year.
I swear your love give me fever. All the time you come and the shiver. Now you be the one, just believe that. La diva, my diva. Oh, you turn Batman to Cena with your sexy body, Carolina. For your love, I go fight like John Cena. Hata kama nikiwa nguvu sina, kupe kila kitu, mchana kwa usiku, tufanye mavitu, baby mavitu, kupe kila kitu, mchana kwa usiku, tufanye mavitu, baby, vitu, baby, sota kislang na pa wine, jaja yo put jaja. Jaja, your body, jaja. No, 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 no. Jaja, your body, jaja. No, no. Jaja, your body, jaja, baby. Jaja, your body, jaja. Jaja, your body, jaja. Jaja, your body, jaja. Jaja, your body, jaja, baby. I hope you know, say, this is say, where you carry for back, they make me the quick. Baby, quick. Come back here, say. The rain fall from the morning till the night. Oh la la la, la 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 la. Kupe kila kitu, mchana kwa usiku, tufanye mavitu, baby mavitu. Kupe kila kitu, mchana kwa usiku, tufanye mavitu, baby. Vitu, baby, sota kislang na pa wine. Jaja, your body, jaja. Jaja, your body, jaja. No, 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 no. Jaja, your body, jaja. No, no. Jaja, your body, jaja, baby. Jaja, your body.